Hey, seventh graders. Hi, parents. So glad you're joining us back today for session 2. Today's big question is, who is Martin Luther and what does it mean to be Lutheran? We're going to be exploring two big ideas. Number one, we are part of this larger story that started at creation and goes all the way through Jesus and Luther, the church that we're a part of right here, and the church into the future. It's pretty exciting to be a part of this big story. Number two big idea today is grace. Oh, what a great word, grace. Simply put, grace is the unmerited gift of God's love and acceptance. The unmerited gift of God's love and acceptance. We're going to dive into the Bible a little later on in the session, and you'll get to kind of explore what that word means to you and how it's worked in your life. So for now, I want to talk a little bit about where we fit into this bigger picture. So if we go back to the beginning, to creation, we call this time prehistory. That's the time before we know kind of the year when things happened. You'll probably recognize some of these stories from like Sunday school, or maybe remember them from freshman competition. You know, Adam and Eve, people know are all the way down to that makes sense. But we choose our selfish desires over our relationship with God. And because we choose this, people focus more and more into ways into the sin cycle that is keep living on. So God created the world, but God created us, but people sin and cause great chaos. So what is God going to do with this broken creation? Well, and our master, Abraham created process God. Love that Abraham said more than the stars. And God will more years, King David comes to power, and he is the king of all of Israel, is united kingdom, and God gives David another promise. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever. Now, if we fast forward another 500 years or so, we get to Jesus. And Jesus is the fulfillment of all these promises that God laid out in the Old Testament. Jesus was born. And God, Jesus. Now, the story doesn't end there. Oftentimes, we end the story with Jesus as if the church didn't keep going, but they did. And for a long time after Jesus, the church was persecuted. They weren't able to be Christians out in public. And it's not until about 380 CE that the Roman Empire says Christianity is now going to be the church of the state. And we know that this kind of enmeshed, kind of put together religion and politics and social and all of the mix of everything that was happening in people's lives got smushed together when this happened. And the Roman Empire is around for a while, but then in about 470 CE, the Roman Empire falls. They fall apart. They had been the stabilizing force in the world. And when the Roman Empire falls apart, there's this power vacuum. And in the West, think like Italy and Germany and Spain and those countries there. In the West, the church steps into this power vacuum. And through the monastery movement, more and more land is taken over by the church, and more knowledge is stored in the church. And that is what helps the world continue when the Roman Empire isn't around anymore. Now, this entwinedness of politics and religion and social and economics and all these things lead to some troubles. Now, in the East, think like Turkey and Greece, North Africa, the Holy Land, the Byzantine Empire gained some strength, while the Western Church is gaining strength on the Western side of the world. And if we fast forward about another 500 years, we get to 1074. So this is when those two sides, the East and the West, have this huge clash. The Byzantine Empire wants the East to be in control of the church and the world. And the church in Rome, they want to be the power center and dictate what happens in the world. And at one time, there's 3 popes. Nobody knows who's in charge. And this causes the Great Schism. But let's focus in a little bit more on that Western church, because it's about 500 years later in 1517 CE when a guy comes onto the world stage named Martin Luther. Now, by this time, the Roman Catholic Church had gained so much power and control over everything that was happening in the world of the people. Um, they just had it all. And they started doing things that weren't really in line with what Jesus had taught. And so Martin Luther and other reformers even before him started to say, "Hey, this ain't right. Let's read the Bible. Let's see what's happening here." And the reformers before Luther, it didn't end so well for them. But by Luther's time, something really amazing happened: the printing press. And because of the printing press, Luther was able to spread his ideas through a lot of people, and they started to gain more and more power. Now, Luther had some really influential people backing him that kept him alive, kept him safe, gave him a place where he could translate the Bible. Did you know that Luther translated the Bible? And this was the first time the Bible was translated into a language that normal people, everyday people, could read. And because of that, Luther said, "Hey, everybody, you can read the Bible. You can see what God has to tell us yourself. You don't have to go through the church or a priest or anybody else. You can do this." And that was huge and changed how Christianity was done. Now, Luther's main point was not to start a new church at first. He really just wanted to reform the church and help the church get back on the right track. But as things continued to develop, that was just not possible. And so the Lutheran Church was started. Now, lots of other people liked what Luther was saying, and then they read the Bible and they thought, "Oh, I have a little bit different idea than what Luther was saying." We get reformers like John Calvin and Zwingli and the Anabaptist movement, and all these other people start thinking about the Bible and saying, "Here's what I think it means." And maybe you can see where this is going, because today we have all kinds of different Protestant Christians. Those are Christians in the West who aren't Roman Catholic. Think like Methodist, Baptist, evangelicals, all Pentecostals. All of these kind of different Christians are because of what Luther started and saying, "Hey, read your Bible, see what you think it should say." It's amazing. Now, we also need to say that today that the Roman Catholic Church is not the same as it was in Luther's day. And actually, there's been lots of dialogues between Lutherans and Catholics to say, "Hey, we pretty much agree on everything, and we understand that we kind of got things messed up back then, and let's focus on what we agree on, which is Jesus," which is so amazing. And I want you to know that it was through Luther that we started reading our Bibles for ourselves. So later in this lesson, you get to dive into a Bible. You get to see what the biblical writers, what they wrote down about things like grace and what it means to have God love us. And so you get to see for yourself. And even our whole confirmation program is about you knowing and believing what you think should be true, which is amazing. Now, Luther did another really great thing. Luther, at his time, it was only the priests that kind of got to read the Bible and think about how God worked in the world. And so there were all these Christians who didn't really know very much about what it meant to be Christian. Maybe you feel that way, that you don't know very much about what it means to be Christian. But so Luther wrote down what he calls the Small Catechism. The Small Catechism. You should have got one, right? You have one. And we're going to be exploring that, because it's through the Small Catechism that Luther lays out the basics of what it means to be a Christian. That's what we believe in the creeds, what God tells us in the Ten Commandments, and what God does for us through the sacraments. And so that's a lot of what we're going to be learning about this year. The other thing in the Small Catechism is the Lord's Prayer, which teaches us all about prayer and how God interacts with us in the world. We did that last year in 6th grade. So if you missed that, that's okay. Feel free to read that part of your Small Catechism. So that's a brief, condensed history of the world from creation through today. And I want you to know that the church today is still thinking about who God is. We're still reading the Bible. We're still figuring out. We're still trying to say, how is God trying to put us all back together? Where is God acting in the world? And that is so exciting for us to be a part of, because God says we get to be a part of it because we've been gifted and we get to use those gifts to serve the world, which is so awesome. So, in just a few minutes, you're going to get to watch another video that focuses in more on the Reformation and how Luther's part came in that. I'd love to hear your questions about all of this. I'll see you soon.